Morning, friends. Welcome to another meeting of the United Lodge of Theosophies here in Bethesda, Maryland. Just a few words of introduction. I'm looking at the Secret Doctrine, second volume, and the title of the page is The Birthday of the Dyhanis. 140 years ago, HBB and William Q. Judge and William Steele Alcott started what one could call a quiet revolution, not ones of bombs as we see going off in the world today, but a spiritual revolution. It was a continuation of the Theosophical movement. One could say the latest incarnation of the Theosophical revolution, thus movement. And why this particular week, 140 years ago? Well, it states in the Secret Doctrine under the page, The Birthday of the Dyhanis, that on this particular day and others throughout the year, certain constellations in the universe gather, and as a result, one can, as it states here, certain magic feats can be performed, and so it's rather auspicious. It gives an impetus to, I guess, whatever the effort is to be sent forward, and so we can surmise that they took advantage of this particular time to inaugurate that revolution, which continues today. There have been those who have been collateral damage. There have been those who have been wounded and those who have died within this revolution, but yet there are those soldiers who still come and go. They have made that decision in prior lives and in lifetimes to continue the effort. And we're here today, continue that effort being that of the message to be delivered to the world from the masters through the messengers, Madam HBB, the latest messenger. The reading for today comes from the voice of the silence. Look on, what seest thou before thine eye, O aspirant to godlike wisdom? The cloak of darkness is upon the deep of matter. Within its folds I struggle. Beneath my gaze it deepens, Lord. It is dispelled beneath the waving of thy hand. A shadow moveth, creeping like the stretching serpent coil. It grows, swells out, and disappears in the darkness. It is a shadow of thyself outside the path, cast on the darkness of thy sins. Yea, Lord, I see the path, its foot, mire, its summit lost in glorious light nirvanic. And now I see the ever-narrowing portals on the hard and thorny path to Janana. Thou seest well, Lanu, these portals lead the aspirant across the waters on to the other shore. Each portal hath a golden key that opens its gate, and these keys are Dana, the key of charity and love immortal; Shila, the key of harmony in word and act, the key that counterbalances the cause and effect. It leaves no further room for karmic action. Kshanti, patience sweet that naught can ruffle. Viagra, indifference to pleasure and to pain, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. Virya, the dauntless energy that fights its way to supernal truth out of the mire of lies terrestrial. Dhyana, whose golden gate once open leads the Narjo towards the realm of Sat, eternal and ceaseless contemplation. Prajna, the key to which makes of a man a god, creating him a bodhisattva, son of the Dyhanis. Such to the portals are the golden keys. Today we have a talk. It's entitled The Paramitas. Also, this is the weekend day that we do have a second study class out of the book that we're presently reading from, Living the Life by B.P. Warrior. And next week's talk will be Dreams. And now, the talk.
Welcome, friends. We have been talking about the Paramitas. it is a very deep subject, and it cannot really be covered all at the same time. As the first student read from the Voice of the Silence, we see that there are 7 of them listed in there: Dana, Shila, Shanti, Viraga, Virya, Dhyana, and Prajna. And we have covered the first one, which is Dana. Today we're going to cover Shila. So the Paramita is Shila. And we always put our parabola here, and because they go in pairs. This is Shanti. Virya. This is Prajna. So please remember that these are sets of virtues that we keep in the back. So also remember that we don't really practice all these separately, that one is related to the other, and that the recommendation is that we work with Dana, Shila, and Shanti, and you see that the higher aspect of it then is activated, and these then become an internal process that is actually changing the individual who is following it. This is a transmutation or transformation of the individual by himself. It is the work he is doing, and through this process he's transforming his inner nature to fit himself to serve at a higher or more appropriate manner, because his discriminative and intuitive powers kick in, and he's able to do more work for humanity, that is. So last time we talked about Dana. Today we're talking about Shila. What is Dana? Dana is charity for all, and through this process, as we just said, we approach Shila. So from the goodness of one's inner nature, Shila, which is harmony in word and act, should really come as a natural process. So how do we perform these? Well, harmony in word and act is Shila. How are we going to bring this about? Well, it is a virtue, so we're going to ask what is its true value and what is the value to the individual. The virtue of Shila says that we need to identify ourselves with the suffering of the other human being. We are all in contact with others, and that we are to get involved in the suffering of the others. And in the voice it says, until you remove the tear from the other's eyes, you should make that effort. However, this unconditional love does not come easily to humanity, because we have lived a different kind of self-centered life, and now we're trying to change that into a universal application of this true giving, and that comes difficult for us. But it is stated here that through effort and continuous of this effort, we will eventually succeed in accomplishing it. How do we measure the worth of anything? Well, to this student, it's very obvious. It is spiritual value of what it is being done that has to be measured. And this ultimately is determined by the ethical acts of the person. And why should we scrutinize it? Perfection of morality means that the person who is actually doing these acts do not consider himself or herself as virtuous. So the person who's doing it has to kind of put itself out of the equation, because this is becoming egolessness, and that is the true value of any service to humanity. So a Buddhist teacher says that this cannot be achieved until we have that even-mindedness in approaching anyone that comes into our life, that we are to mix with what society perhaps calls not desirable people, as well as those who are holy men. And when we start this process, it might come difficult to us. Why? Because we are not trained to function in this manner. Just like a tennis player. A person who doesn't play tennis all the time can perhaps have a good shot now and then. But the tennis player is someone who is training the eyes, nerves, muscles, coordinating it so that that good shot is perhaps most of the time and then becomes all the time. It's the same way with the person who is giving the service, that in time the training makes that process come easier and easier, and then it becomes a natural process from inside out, knowing what to do. Just like listing this, we need to be aware that virya is energy, and any creative effort requires energy. So these, as stated, are not separate from one another, and virya is necessary to start things that we want to do, but it is also necessary to keep it in mind that it needs to be there when we want to change things. There's a statement in the voice where HPB reminds us to be aware or beware of change. Why does she say that? Why should we be aware of this coming about? Well, just as we just said, we are in this process going from egocentric to egolessness. And this is not an easy equation to achieve, we told ourselves, because it requires time, and we're going to train the lives to give this service, and we want it to become a natural process. But we just said virya is necessary for bringing about change. Bringing about change. So when we bring about change, we have to make a conscious effort not to change the stuff that we want to retain. We're training ourselves to go from egocentric to egolessness, and at the same time we want this virya, the energy. What kind of energy is virya? It's the energy of the ego. So we want that energy to bring that change about, but we don't want to change things that we want to keep. So we need to be aware as to what we are going to change. That creativity comes from that energy, and without it we will not achieve any spiritual moral living. And what was brought out was that just like when we are using the Pythagorean theorem, we don't verify its validity every time. We have looked at it. Even as a mathematician, we wouldn't validate its use every time. A mathematician knows what the theorem stands for and then uses it repeatedly to give the idea to the student body. In the same manner then, once we have set ourselves on this path and we know how moral life needs to be conducted, are we going to be affected by all those around us, family, friends, society, or we're going to stand erect and carry out what the moral code demands of us in this respect? So, Ralph Emerson says, "It is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude." So, in these matters, when we are practicing these moral actions, who is the highest and true judge? Well, it is obviously our higher divine nature. We cannot go by social acceptance or criticism in these things. That once we have determined what needs to be done, we have to stay with it. And moral actions do not come out of fear, because sometimes we see that religious injunctions are based on that fear. If you're going to do it out of fear, you're not going to do it when you know that you're not going to be found out. For instance, if a child washes his hands before dinner for the sole purpose of pleasing the mother, he's not going to do it when the mother is not looking. He needs to accept that responsibility because it's the right and correct thing to do. So these psychological injunctions are of no value to us if it is done out of fear. In this philosophy, motive carries the highest value. Motive. So, moral actions carried out in this manner through psychological fear actually become immoral actions because their basis is not correct. For instance, in our society, a lot of charitable activity goes on, but what is the motive behind it? Who is giving it? Is the giving done because there's a whole bunch of excess money in the family, or they want fame for themselves, they want to advertise their name, or are they doing it because they're functioning at the level of necessity, because the giving is done to the people who need it. They need it, and so it is being provided. So motive here carries a tremendous value. And Jesus says, "Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven." So we must not allow our good intentions to remain mere intentions, but act on them. So, intentions. Intentions are not of any value, because just as Carlyle says, the end of a man is an action and not a thought, though it were the noblest, the master confirms this statement by saying, good intentions count little with us. So intentions don't carry weight. Unless it becomes an action. So action is the end of a man. So we need to be known by our actions and not without our good intentions. Until we carry it out, it's not of any value to anybody. But on the other hand, Mr. Judd says, if we make a promise to somebody, we need to keep it because we have made that promise. Here the intention needs to be carried forward. And he says, the promises I make to myself, I consider them as important as the promises I make to others. What is he speaking of here? He's speaking of a vow or resolve. This is the season coming. At New Year, people make a lot of promises to themselves. Those are resolves. Do they carry it out? So it's very important to know what we are doing with this resolve. To whom are we giving this promise when we do it to ourselves? It's not the personality we're giving it. This vow, this is given to our divine higher nature, because that's the permanent in us that sees and knows what's going on. So Shila then has been defined as the key that counterbalances the cause and effect and leaves no further room for karmic action. So how do we then neutralize these events that come into our lives? If the circumstances we are placed in is the cause, our action then would be the effect. So if we have circumstances we are placed in, our reaction to it is the effect. We made the cause, and the environment provides this opportunity for us to counterbalance it. The effect then need to counterbalance it. And what are we talking about here? Let me give an example. For instance, simple one. We want to go to the theater. We're at the ticket counter. And when it comes our turn to buy the tickets, the ticket counter closes and there are no more tickets to buy. Are we going to then argue with the clerk at the ticket counter saying, but I came all the way, I need to see this, I made a lot of effort? Well, that will not counterbalance it, because you're making new karma by demanding things from this person. Counterbalancing it means that you accept the circumstance that comes to you, you don't fight it, and you accept it, and you do the appropriate thing when it comes. So that's what that means, that the circumstance that comes is the cause. I put it there, and then how do I look at it and what do I do with it is the event, the outcome of the event. So, not complaining, not grumbling, acceptance, and the other word they use is resignation. So, resignation then is necessary for learning the lesson that needs to come from this event or the circumstance. So, what happens when we create new karmic debt? It goes onto the balance sheet. We have debt, and then we have to pay it. A lot of people perhaps are not aware of what that really means. but we need to be very careful with our activity that we don't make new debt. That is not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is the intent and what we do to face that event. But there comes again discrimination, that internal hunch as to what to do in each circumstance, which shows that these come to us for the realization that higher self is there, and the personality is to go along with the service, but it is to the general humanity, but also it is the acknowledgement that this event came from a higher source and that we need to face it. Who is the higher source? All people call it higher power, higher source. Some people call it God, but this is our inner self, the divine inner self. So, perfection of morality then does bring a spiritual integrity. Perfection of morality brings, this is very important, spiritual integrity. It's important. So, the difference when we have reached this event or this stage in our life is that a morally integrated person is not dependent for their happiness for outside sources. It doesn't mean that the person doesn't use those sources, whatever it is. Power, money, approval, success, love, friendship. A morally integrated person uses all of those, but is not dependent on it. It does not. It is not a emotional state for him. This integrity then makes him independent of all those events that come to him. And the Gita confirms that the spiritual knowledge, when it comes, the one forsaketh every desire which entereth into his heart, and of himself is happy and content in the self through the self. And the Dhammapada states it this way: not only by discipline of moral principles, nor only by resolutions and vows, not only by much study, nor even by attainment in meditation or in seclusion and solitude, do I release myself from bondage unto bliss. This is not attained by worldlings. O bhikkhu, be not deceived in self-confidence as long as you have not reached the extinction of desire. What kind of desire is that? And put personal under here. Right? We're talking about this higher and lower again. The personality is there. It's going to interject its head into the equation if we allow it. Egolessness means removing that out of the equation. So, and when you look at the parabola, we must keep that in mind at all times. Shila and Dhyana go hand in hand. We're studying Dhyana in Patanjali's Yoga, for instance. Shila and Dhyana must go hand in hand, because merely restraining our words and deeds is useless if our mind is full of craving, aversion, lust, etc. So where is the fight? The fight is in the mind. It's in the mind. Fight is in the mind. So what is needed then is mental training. And what did we read at the beginning of book 3 in Patanjali? It says concentration, contemplation, and meditation is necessary for this process. But the recommendation is that we have half an hour of time in each day to sit, to get in touch with our higher nature, to put our actions to the judgment of the higher, to see how we did on that particular day, and meditate, learn to meditate. And this comes from first learning how to concentrate. And when we have learned to concentrate, then extension of the time determined by the inner then becomes contemplation. Contemplation then results in samadhi, which is meditation, which is the higher aspect of that process. But if we are just going to do this training for half an hour, and then we're going to go into the world and do as we wish with the rest of it, are we going to be successful? So, concentration of the mind should be preceded by yama. And these are observances. Observances. What are those? Truthfulness, non-stealing, continence. Continence is self-restraint, non-receiving of gifts. Eventually that's where we're going, because we are out to serve, not to receive. And the other one is niyama, and niyama is cleanliness, or includes cleanliness, austerity. Austerity is strict self-discipline, study, and eventually self-surrender to that divine self. To get there, purification is necessary. So what are these that we need to get rid of? Fear, greed for riches, which is called avarice, pride, envy, uncharitableness, and ambition. What's the ambition in there? Ambition gets involved in power, material objects, and attainment of lower personal desires. Also, purifying the effort step by step by killing the desire for material possessions and gradually overcoming the subtler ones. Power, even knowledge is listed in it. Power, knowledge, love, happiness, and fame for oneself. So, the essence of the discipline to then attaining contemplation requires physical, mental, moral, and spiritual development on parallel lines, because we are going to practice all of them all at the same time, and we are getting stronger in all aspects of our life. So the physical man needs to become ethereal and sensitive. Ethereal and sensitive. Perhaps we should put these up. Sensitive and ethereal. we do have this body, this one. So what is that? We're replacing the elementals with the ones that is going to enable us to practice what we talked about today. And that makes the physical body more etherealized. What else is ethereal? The inner astral is also ethereal. We're purifying it too, because it is all, even though it is electromagnetic, it is still made up of elementals. So sensitivity then comes from that process of purification. Physical body becomes more sensitive and ethereal. And the mental man is going to become more penetrating and profound. What does that mean? What does Theosophy tell us? We don't accept anything on face value just because somebody is saying it. It becomes important for the individual himself or herself to prove the validity of what is being said. Does it stand in common sense to the inner heart? This is why it has to become a living power for it to be able to go out and do what is necessary. And penetration and becoming profound, in other words, you read it and you're saying, well, what exactly does that mean? You're looking for the underlying meaning, and you're trying to then go out and live an active life based on it. So that is very necessary. And the moral man has to become self-denying. Self-denying. We just read all these things up on the top. We have to give up possessions, which are desires, for power, knowledge, love, happiness, fame. And the more generally recognized ones, fear, greed, pride, envy, uncharitableness, and ambition, all in here. We are going to be self-denying. And the other one is philosophical. Philosophy is the key to unlocking all and everything we talk about in this theosophical tenets that were brought out in its general application to our life. So, we will stop here and open it for discussion.
When you speak of sensitiveness, what are you focusing on in that regard? Is when you say you have it listed on physical, can you give some examples more of what you're referring to in terms of sensitivity?
Are you sensitive to the other's needs?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an inner feeling as to what their trouble is? Some people are not very open about things and they might not say, but you can also approach them. Mm-hmm. That is sensitivity to the other person's needs. That's a simple example.
Okay.
Yeah. What else would you become sensitive to? Mm-hmm. What about your own needs? Would it not make you more sensitive to your own inner self? Mm-hmm. Would you not perceive things on the inner line? This ethereal, when you become more ethereal, you're then becoming correspondent with that. With what? With that which is the astral, mm-hmm. right? That sensitivity is as a result of that process. The two go together, right? It is everywhere stated in the writings that psychic nature in human beings is coming to the forefront. This is just a natural developmental stage that we're going to go through. But here's the catch-22 about it. Psychic. This development is a natural process we're going to go through. But what we need to understand is that psychic and spiritual don't go hand in hand. Why? This is mostly in the mental field. It overpowers us because of our thinking process up to this point. We've been involved in egocentric thought, speech, and activity. Egocentric. What we're trying to do is become egoless, become universal, impartite, and remove this egocentrism from ourselves and open that consciousness to perceive at a larger level. Isn't that what we're trying to do? When you identify with the other, that other becomes part of yourself. You would never hurt someone if they're part of yourself. Your consciousness now is able to look at it and understand internally. Okay? So the psychic then has personal stuff in it. And as soon as whatever spiritual activity you are involved in has this tint in it, it becomes psychic. The spiritual has no tint of personal. No, I should put this, no tint of personal. But the psychic is just that, it's personal. As soon as your effort has any tint in it, immediately it becomes psychic effort. It's not spiritual. And this is what we're warned again over and over. Even in HPV's time, all of her students, one by one, fell once she left the scene. Why? She knew what was coming and warned them. Do not give into psychic activity. What does that mean? Before we have put our foot on the path, people thought that they had arrived at the goal. Okay? So, the goal is worth every effort because it makes us perfected human beings in someone's life. Nobody achieves this stuff in one lifetime, it's too short. But when we get there, the effort is worth it. We have become a true worker for the benefit of humanity. In the meantime, we're going to struggle with our issues and we're going to try and overcome them. And this is what it is provided for us, that we work with it and try to get rid of it. And that egolessness is necessary because what happened to Viraga? I think we got rid of it. Viraga is indifference, non-attachment. And it's obviously it's necessary for all of them, just like Virya, which is energy, is necessary for all this activity, so is this one. Because at its head is what? Patience. And that is what? What is it? What is the phrase we use in relation to the masters? We don't use love. What is the word we use? That's one of them. What's the other one? Devotion to the other and to our higher. What else? Compassion. Compassion is the head of all everything. Okay, so we need to understand these paramitas and their inner significance to becoming a true worker for humanity, because nobody said it's easy. Paramita heights are very difficult to reach, but nevertheless, if we don't try, we won't get there, will we? So we're going to try. So the spiritual and psychic is the difference, and the recommendation is that we become a spiritual first, a spiritual energy first. In other words, take the egoism out of the equation to the best of our ability. Just go out and do it, and that's what eventually brings it about. Just go out and do what comes right. Yes.
We develop these five senses now.
Yes.
Now, this student understands the next sense we're in the process of developing is that psychic.
Ethereal.
And then
Ethereal.
Ethereal.
Permeability is what is called in the secret doctrine.
So is that what the next sense is?
Yes. That's what she called it
We
at
call
that
it
time.
psychic, I think.
Permeability.
Permeability. Okay.
And she says when we actually get there, we might call it something else. But at this time, this is the name she gave it. What's permeability? Isn't it seeing through things? Okay, ethereal. So it should really occur to every human mind as to why she would say that to us, that we're the most solid. Now, we have reached the most solidity that we are going to be. But she also said that humanity has reached halfway point. This is the fourth round, and she said our humanity, or particularly this nation, is going towards spirituality. If you look on page 200, there is a diagram there that explains this to us, because we come down, now we're going up. Okay, so if we are most solid now and we're going towards spirituality, obviously we're also going to etherealize eventually. How many thousands of years, who knows? Masters are quiet as the stones, they don't say. So, but we need to keep that in mind. Mr. Judge says this process eventually enables one to become one-pointed. Dhyana, that meditation process we talked about, which is in Patanjali's yoga aphorisms also, enables one to become one-pointed. In other words, your inner self has come to your aid and is enabling you, because one of the students says that the thief is going to be taken upper and upper. Who's doing this upper? It's obviously the inner divine self, out of this effort enabling the personality to perceive at different levels, because when we go to sleep, this inner self is free. It communicates with the higher consciousness and higher intelligences, but the personality, this body, the name and so forth that goes with it, Namarupa, stays right here on the earth level. All the brain activity is ended, there's no electrical activity, it's minimal, and the divine is with the divine. But with this process, the personality is becoming more and more aware of the divine, and the divine is helping lift the thief towards heaven.
So, did you?
Well, I guess, but actually,
Oh, you. But you have a chance.
I might have finished. was thinking about a movie that I saw.
Mhm.
I've seen it about 15 times already, and it's about this doctor who's a psychiatrist, and um, he was one of the better of the psychiatrists. He was like the most elite type of, you know how to do that, and he won an award. And winning the award, it exposed him, and one of his old patients found him at his home. He was on his way to receive the award, and one of his old patients, a young man, had entered into his house. And while he was dressing, they found him in his bathroom, and he said, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, do you know who I am?" And he said, "No, I don't think I do know who you are." And he said, "Well, I am one of your old patients. You know how you see your patients, you know, you get their money and you go on to the next person, you never remember who they are. You promised me you'd help me." And he said, "No, I help all my patients." He said, "No, you didn't help me." So he shot and killed him in his bathroom. And so the story goes that he was killed instantly, but it's an M. Night Shyamalan. I'm looking at M. Night Shyamalan. He's a Hindu Indian. He writes movies. He's pretty new. And the gist of the story was that the doctor, his body, he had to give up his body, but he continued in that moment. That process was still in his mind. And he didn't think he was dead. So what he did to overcompensate, because he felt really bad about this young man, he really didn't remember him. And so what he did, he went and found a younger child. And he was determined to help that child and not forget that child. And his intent was changed through the whole process, where he really, genuinely, really was determined to help this child. No matter how hard it was, the child was difficult, you know, the parent was difficult. It did not matter to him, you know, what the hardship was.
Okay, what's your question?
Well, it was, it's not a question. I'm just saying it was his intent. He had an intent. His intent was different. It was, you know, he was a doctor, you know, he was making his money, he was doing his thing. He went from one patient to the next. But with this young child, he changed his intent 100%.
Okay.
To the service of this one kid.
Without a body.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was called The Sixth Sense. It was a nice movie, but you know, I could see the message that the director was trying to push in the movie.
Okay. Well, we talked about the intent having the greatest importance in whatever it is that we're doing. So, however, all our actions on earth are carried out through the body. Once we lose the body, we're not dead. Okay. Body drops, but the astral man is going to be in that astral field until the designated time for that life period ends. So HPB says these astral ghouls, I think is what she called them, especially if they are preying on those individuals or persons who have an inclination to think in that direction. So the astral can affect all those who are in line with that mental thinking capacity. Okay, so in order for an astral man to be able to help another, cannot be done through a physical body because he no longer has it.
It's not. It's just the entertainment of it. It was just
But
a message.
well, listen,
the message across.
but it can help if the intention is to be useful. Then you can put those ideas out into the minds of the others.
I think that's what he was trying to do. The director. It's just it was a picture.
Okay.
You know, they had
So,
to make it entertainment, but
That
I got the message of it. So
Yes.
similar
So,
to,
yeah, in his next life, perhaps he will come as a higher individuality. Rather than being concerned for himself, perhaps he'll be more concerned for the other.
and I think that's what I was getting at. How just circumstances can actually, I mean, how you can transition to.
Well, the circumstances that we are put in actually is for learning experiences. We just talked about it. But death removes that opportunity from us because the physical drops. We're not on the physical plane anymore to be able to do what we need to do. Excuse me. Yes, what's your question?
The subject covers the moral aspect of
Right.
humanity per se. Excuse me. So, why is it so difficult then? You know, you speak of the moral, you speak of the physical world, the physical aspect, the mental aspect, but the moral, people know pretty much what's right and wrong, but why is it so hard? You know, all this crime we have and all the other things, the vices, you know, those would be the opposite of the virtues. And I think it's somewhere even in one of the books where it says vices and virtue, you have to overcome both. You know, it's just like the economy, you know, or the duality. You got to use them up. Anyway, I guess the essential point is, why is it so difficult for man to become morally right? Is it because of the material world we're in?
Okay. We actually covered it at the beginning of the talk. In Shila, it is stated we're expected to do correct or moral actions moment to moment. And that is why it is so very important to understand the significance of what the statement is. It's not that now and then we're going to go out and do what is right, but it is expected that we do it all the time. And that's where the difficulty is. Excuse me. Why? What have we been doing up to this time? We have to ask that each individual of themselves. We have been involved in life, but egocentric. Me. That's the difficulty. Now we want to train the lives that make the sheaths to do a different way of living. Is that not true? If you're following moral, ethical actions, and this is going to be the lifestyle, that means we're going to do that all the time to the best of our ability. And the lives in us are what? The elementals. You call them your babies yesterday, I believe, at the gathering. Elementals. These are colorless. They're points of energy. But through use, repeated use, you give them their characteristic. They are in your own physical body, astral body, mental body, psychic makeup. It is all made up of elementals. These are electromagnetic points of energy. And through this repeated use, you coalesce them to yourself. So they become your physical body, your inner sheath, mental makeup. So now, after how many lifetimes we've been around for millions of years, correct? So in each life we have come and perhaps we have lived an egocentric life. Egocentric is I am at the center. This personality is at the center. Everything else revolves around it. Now you're saying, I don't want my personality interfering with all this charitable work I want to do in the universe through love and giving, and you're telling these, I am now going to repel you. I'm going to replace you. Are they going to give in to you? Not so easy. You want to replace them. You are going to etherealize and become more sensitive to your condition in life. But these coalesce, not just one layer, all of them coalesce and make a fight to retain that mold you have put them into. They're not going to easily give up what they have become. So Mr. Wadia addresses that, and he says the erect integrity of the person is being attacked by these elemental lives because they don't want to die. You have created them, now you want to kill them, in other words, or replace them would be a better word. But replacement means you're going to kick them out and gather to yourself more ethereal lives. And that is why it is so very difficult. It requires a real fight to do so, to overcome it. If there are no other questions, we'll close it. Or
Okay,
do you
we'll
have
have a
one?
short break and continue our study of living the life.
Thank you, everyone.